So, you are likely tuning in today because you have this genuine interest in understanding the real, actual mechanics of your career.
Right.
You probably digest a lot of information and you want to know why certain people succeed in such a massive way. But you're also probably totally exhausted by the generic advice we're constantly fed.
Oh, absolutely. The whole hustle culture narrative.
Exactly. That endless stream of posts insisting that if you just, wake up at 4 in the morning, adopt this punishing work ethic, and grind for 100 hours a week, you'll inevitably reach the top.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It is. And today we are completely dismantling that narrative. We have a really compelling stack of source material to guide us. We're doing a deep dive into a conversation from YouTube creator Ali Abdaal.
A great creator.
Yeah, and in this specific video, he's breaking down a book called The Unfair Advantage, and he's actually doing it alongside the authors Asha Ali and Hassan Kuba.
Which is such a valuable dynamic to have.
Right. And this conversation, it offers this incredibly cold, calculated look at what actually drives outsized achievement.
And our mission for this deep dive is to strip away that pervasive myth. The idea that massive success is purely the result of putting in your 10,000 hours.
Which we hear all the time.
Constantly. Look, hard work is a baseline requirement, obviously. But it is only a fraction of the actual equation. By the end of our time together, our goal is to help you look objectively at your own life and identify your unique, hidden, competitive edges.
Yeah, we're moving entirely away from the cliche motivation stuff.
We have to. We're getting into the highly specific, sometimes uncomfortable realities of what actually propels people forward.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the core thesis these authors present right out of the gate, it's a difficult concept for some to accept.
It really is.
But it fundamentally shifts how you view your own trajectory.
Yeah.
They argue that life is simply not a level playing field. It is inherently unfair.
And that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
It is. But rather than letting that fact breed resentment, recognizing it is actually the crucial first step to engineering your own strategy.
Yet to truly grasp this, we need to look at the foundational equation they bring up in the source material. The authors define success, however you personally choose to measure that, as a combination of two distinct variables.
Okay.
Fair play plus unfair advantages. Society conditions us to fixate almost exclusively on the fair play side of that scale.
Right, the hard work.
Exactly.
Wow.
While completely ignoring the massive invisible weights sitting on the other side.
I found the startup founder analogy they use to illustrate this just incredibly striking. Let's walk through that.
Let's do it.
So imagine a founder who sets their alarm for 3 o'clock every single morning. They go for a grueling 2-hour run, return home, open their laptop, and work relentlessly for 15 hours straight.
The classic hustle.
Right. That is the absolute epitome of fair play. We applaud that because theoretically any of us could choose to set our alarms for 3 a.m.
We could choose to endure that strain.
Exactly. It's a replicable action driven by sheer willpower. But, and this is the big but, what happens when we look at that exact same founder and add one little detail? Their parents are extraordinarily wealthy and simply handed them a $500,000 check to fund their company on day one.
Right. The entire context of their achievement changes instantly.
It totally does.
Because that $500,000 injection is an unfair advantage. It provides this colossal boost to the business. It accelerates their timeline. It shields them from early failures. But it's entirely circumstantial.
You can't just hustle your way into having rich parents.
Exactly. The vast majority of people cannot simply decide to have wealthy parents who can write a blank check.
And connecting this directly to you, the listener, understanding this equation is a massive psychological relief.
Wow, Hugh.
It actively removes the anxiety of horizontal comparison. You know, when you observe someone else's rapid ascent in your industry and wonder why your own progress feels so slow, you have to factor in the invisible scale.
Yeah, you really do. They might be operating with entirely different unfair advantages that you simply do not possess.
Because otherwise, you end up comparing your fair play to their unfair advantage, which is a game you will always, always lose.
Every time.
So the question becomes, how do we identify what our own advantages are? The authors constructed this thing called the Miles framework to map this out. That's M-I-L-E-S.
And they are careful to note that this entire framework is useless without a specific psychological foundation.
Which we are definitely going to get to later. But let's look at the letters themselves. I noticed in the source material they brought up Evan Spiegel to illustrate the M, which stands for money.
Yes, Evan Spiegel is the textbook definition of the money advantage here.
Because he built Snapchat, which on the surface looks like a pure meritocracy story. It's just a college kid with a clever app idea. How does he actually fit into this money advantage?
Well, he became the world's youngest self-made billionaire at 24. He certainly worked hard and executed a brilliant idea, which is his fair play. But his background provided a structural safety net and a springboard that very few people possess.
Right.
He grew up in a multi-million-dollar residence in Los Angeles. He attended elite, incredibly expensive private schools. His parents were highly successful, well-connected lawyers.
So it wasn't just having nice things.
No, not at all. That specific background doesn't just buy comfort, it buys proximity. It placed him in social circles where he had direct, casual access to tech entrepreneurs and venture capitalists.
Which is huge.
The average person could spend years trying to secure a 5-minute email exchange with the kind of people Spiegel could just converse with at a dinner party. Money provides a network of prestige and power that accelerates every single business move you make.
Which perfectly transitions us to the I in the framework, intelligence and insight. And reading the notes, it's clear we're not just talking about, being a diligent student who gets good grades.
No, we are talking about raw, statistical outlier intelligence.
Right. The source material highlights the Collison brothers, who founded the payment processing giant, Stripe.
The Collison brothers built a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure company before either of them turned 22. Patrick Collison literally invented his own computer programming language when he was 16 years old.
Wait, he invented a functioning programming language at 16?
At 16. He then left high school early to enroll at MIT. And his brother, John, finished his secondary education with the highest score ever recorded on the Irish Leaving Certificate. He was accepted into Harvard before he even sat for those final exams.
That is just wild.
Right. They put in a staggering amount of effort to build Stripe, undoubtedly. But their baseline, raw intelligence, is a profound unfair advantage. You cannot simply grind or hustle your way into possessing the cognitive capacity required to invent a new programming language as a teenager.
No, you really can't.
That is an innate advantage they leverage to its absolute limit.
Wow. Okay, so that brings us to L, which stands for location and luck. The authors pull a really great quote from Ray Kroc, the guy behind the McDonald's expansion. He stated that the two requirements for major success are being in the right place at the right time and then doing something about it.
The clustering effect in business is very real.
Yeah, if you're building a tech company, physically being located in a place like Silicon Valley unlocks a density of venture capital, specialized talent, and informal networking opportunities. I mean, literal conversations at coffee shops.
Stuff you simply cannot access if you're building the same company in a rural town.
Exactly. But let's look at the second half of that letter, luck. I was actually really drawn to the debate Ali Abdaal introduces in his video analysis here. He pushes back on the authors a bit.
He does, yeah.
He argues that luck might not actually be an unfair advantage at all. He suggests it belongs firmly in the fair play category.
What's fascinating here is how we define the mechanics of luck. Ali Abdaal is referencing the concept of increasing your surface area for serendipity.
I love that concept.
It's powerful.
It is the idea that if I start publishing a weekly newsletter about my industry, if I actively introduce myself to strangers at conferences, or if I relentlessly ask for feedback on my projects, I'm taking deliberate actions to put myself out there.
Right. You are systematically increasing the mathematical odds that a lucky break will happen to you.
Exactly. Like a random investor finding my work or a potential co-founder reaching out. Since anyone can theoretically choose to take those exact same actions to increase their exposure, his argument is that manufactured luck is a fair advantage. It requires sweat equity.
But the authors counter that perspective by digging a layer deeper into the structural realities of taking those actions.
Right.
While you are indeed taking action to manufacture luck, your baseline capacity to do so is often dictated by invisible advantages. Having the free time to write that weekly newsletter or possessing the financial means to travel to those industry conferences.
Or even having the baseline social capital to feel comfortable introducing yourself to executives.
Exactly. Those are often privileges. The authors argue that while you can increase your surface area for serendipity, the size of the brush you are given to paint that surface area is inherently unequal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Moving on to the E in the Miles framework. Education and expertise. Could you walk through the specific YouTube example the authors used to illustrate how education functions as a branding tool?
Sure. Imagine two individuals who both want to start a YouTube channel offering study advice to medical students. One of them happens to be a medical student at Cambridge University.
Okay.
That student is going to heavily feature the Cambridge name in their video titles, their channel art, their overall branding. That institutional association is a massive unfair advantage.
Because of the instant credibility.
Exactly. It immediately grants their channel a level of authority, prestige, and clickability that the other student, perhaps attending a lesser-known regional college, cannot easily replicate, even if the actual advice they offer is identical. The authors categorize the benefits of education into three pillars: the actual knowledge acquired, the alumni network you gain access to, and that signaling effect, which is the sheer prestige of the brand name attached to your resume.
But the source material also points out a significant shift happening in the current landscape regarding that signaling effect, right?
Yes. The modern reality, particularly within dynamic industries like the creator economy or the startup ecosystem, is that the signaling of a prestigious degree is slowly losing its absolute dominance.
Well, it's replacing it.
What the market increasingly values is actual demonstrable expertise.
Mm.
And true expertise is becoming the ultimate uncopyable advantage.
Because you can't fake it.
You can't. And the profound shift here is that this level of specialized knowledge can now be entirely self-taught. Through targeted reading, the internet, relentless curiosity, you can build a reservoir of knowledge that sets you apart. The barrier to entry for world-class information has been decimated.
That's incredibly empowering. And finally, we hit S for status. Outward status functions as a total trump card in many scenarios. How does the source material use Elon Musk to demonstrate this?
Well, because of his immense polarizing global status, Elon Musk could announce tomorrow that he's starting a company selling something entirely absurd.
Like a branded flamethrower.
Which he actually did. And it is instantly guaranteed to receive wall-to-wall international media coverage. It will likely generate millions in revenue simply because his name is attached to it.
It's wild.
That level of established outward status completely bypasses the traditional friction of acquiring customers or generating press.
But the authors also introduce inner status, which they define as your baseline confidence and self-esteem. And this triggers another debate in the source material, very similar to the argument over luck.
Right. Ali Abdaal respectfully disagrees with the authors here, too.
Yeah. He views inner confidence as a skill that can be acquired through fair play. You can attend therapy, you can practice public speaking, you can deliberately put yourself in uncomfortable situations to build resilience. It's a muscle you can train.
He views it as a trainable muscle, yes, whereas the authors view it through a lens of developmental psychology. Someone who grew up in a deeply supportive environment, who was consistently encouraged and made to feel secure in their abilities from childhood, enters adulthood with a massive head start in inner status.
They possess a baseline of psychological safety.
Exactly. The person who has to spend a decade in therapy actively unlearning childhood trauma just to reach a neutral baseline of confidence, they're playing a very different game. The authors argue that innate, deeply ingrained self-belief is an invisible, unfair advantage.
So we have the complete Miles framework: money, intelligence, location, education, and status. Let's pivot to the practical application.
So what?
Right. If a listener has just audited that list and realized they lack significant financial capital, they aren't a generational genius, and they live far away from a major industry hub. What is the actual strategic utility of this framework for them? The author suggests this is all about finding your path of least resistance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the framework is designed to help you completely reevaluate your limitations. What initially appears to be a glaring professional disadvantage is frequently a double-edged sword.
How so?
It can be inverted and weaponized as a highly specific advantage. The strategy is to heavily index on your natural strengths in your career while only focusing on mitigating your weaknesses in your personal life.
Let's look at the mechanics of flipping those disadvantages. Starting with a lack of money. How does having zero funding actually benefit a founder or a creator?
Severe financial constraint forces intense frugality and ruthless creativity. It is the literal embodiment of necessity being the mother of invention.
I've seen that happen so many times.
If you have no money, you cannot afford to mask a flawed product with expensive marketing.
Yeah.
You are forced to build something that people genuinely want to use and share organically.
As opposed to the heavily funded startups.
Right. The authors contrast this with heavily funded startups that receive massive venture capital injections on day one. Those companies often fall into the trap of lazily burning through cash on massive Google and Facebook ad campaigns.
They just buy users.
They optimize for vanity metrics and acquire a user base before they've even verified if their core product is viable. Your lack of capital forces you to build a more resilient, fundamentally sound operation because you simply cannot buy your way out of poor strategic decisions.
What about the location aspect? If a listener is based in a small town, far removed from the networking events and venture capital of San Francisco or New York, how do they invert that?
They leverage something called geographical arbitrage.
Could you break that term down for us?
Sure. Geographical arbitrage is essentially a calculated strategy where you earn income in a strong currency or a high-paying market, while incurring your living expenses in a significantly cheaper location.
Got it.
In practical terms, it means earning Silicon Valley dollars while paying Southeast Asia or rural Midwest rent prices. If you live far from those expensive hubs, your overall cost of living is a fraction of what it would be in a major city.
Which lowers the pressure immensely.
It provides you with a vastly extended runway, which is the amount of time you have to experiment, fail, and iterate on your project before you run out of money. Furthermore, you're not competing in a hyper-saturated, cutthroat local market fighting over the exact same expensive talent pool. Your distance from the center becomes a strategic buffer.
It's entirely about how you frame the variables at your disposal. And that brings us to the final crucial concept from the source material, which is the psychological foundation required to make any of this work.
This is key.
The notes reference Carol Dweck's famous behavioral psychology experiment involving 10-year-old children. Could you explain the setup of that puzzle test?
Absolutely. Dweck presented a group of 10-year-olds with a puzzle that was deliberately engineered to be just slightly too difficult for them to solve. She then observed their reactions to hitting that wall of failure.
Okay.
The children who possessed what she termed a growth mindset reacted with visible enthusiasm. They made comments like, "I love a challenge," or "I was hoping this would be informative." They fundamentally understood that their cognitive abilities were not static. They believed they could improve through applied effort.
The struggle was the point.
Exactly. But the children who exhibited a fixed mindset experienced a catastrophic reaction to the exact same puzzle. They internalized the failure. They believed their intelligence was a fixed, innate trait.
So failing meant they were dumb.
Right. Therefore, failing to solve the puzzle wasn't just a temporary setback. It was empirical proof that they were fundamentally inadequate.
The authors of The Unfair Advantage take Dweck's established concept and apply a crucial modification to it. Because they argue that a pure growth mindset, the heavily commercialized idea that literally anyone can achieve literally anything if they just visualize it and try hard enough, that can actually become toxic and detached from reality.
It definitely can.
So they introduced the reality growth mindset.
The reality growth mindset is a highly pragmatic evolution. It demands a very delicate equilibrium between profound self-belief and cold self-awareness. The authors use a brilliant visual feat. It requires keeping your head in the clouds while keeping your feet firmly cemented on the ground.
You have to acknowledge a fundamental paradox. On one side, human beings are highly adaptable and capable of extraordinary growth through focused effort.
Yes.
But on the other side, you must ground your ambitions in the reality that the starting line is staggered. If you completely ignore the reality of structural unfairness, you will inevitably erode your own mental health trying to execute a playbook that was designed for someone with entirely different advantages.
Exactly. It requires you to stop pedestalizing the hyper-successful. The source material jokes that Elon Musk is not an alien robot sent from the future.
Right.
He is a human being who audited his specific, massive set of advantages and leveraged them aggressively. You shouldn't look at billionaires as untouchable deities, but you also must reject the motivational lie that anybody can do anything without factoring in the very real, structural, unfair advantages at play. It's a demand for radical, pragmatic honesty with yourself.
Okay, we have covered the theory, the framework, and the mindset. Let's get incredibly practical for the listener before we wrap up. The directive here is to audit your own life.
Yes.
But how does someone actually sit down tomorrow morning and execute a functional audit of their own miles framework?
A practical audit requires 3 specific steps. First, look closely at your persistent complaints. The things you consistently view as your biggest professional barriers, being broke, being inexperienced, being isolated, those are often the exact areas where you need to apply the inversion strategy we discussed. Map out how your specific constraint can force a unique solution.
Turn the bug into a feature.
Exactly. Second, you have to look for the intersections. Your unfair advantage is rarely just one thing. It's usually a bizarre combination of 2 or 3 average skills.
Mm,
Maybe you're a decent graphic designer who also has a strange, deep knowledge of supply chain logistics.
that's a rare combo.
That intersection is highly specific and very difficult for someone else to replicate.
Mm.
And third, you must seek external, blunt feedback. We are notoriously bad at identifying our own baseline talents
Why is that?
because things that come naturally to us feel easy, so we just assume they're easy for everyone. Ask 5 colleagues or friends what specific problem they would come to you to solve. The patterns in their answers will point directly to your unfair advantages.
That is a phenomenal blueprint for applying this material. So, to summarize our core takeaways today, success is absolutely not about fixating on the privileges you lack. It is a waste of energy to look at the Miles framework and harbor resentment about the capital or the status you weren't handed.
Pseudo waste of time.
The true utility of understanding this system is to map your own terrain. Find your weird, highly specific, uncopyable advantages, especially the ones currently disguised as limitations, and build your strategy entirely around them.
And it is essential to recognize that this strategic philosophy applies regardless of your current professional arena. Whether you're a founder trying to bootstrap a company, an employee strategizing how to position yourself for a massive promotion, or simply someone trying to navigate a complex industry.
It scales to everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
This is not about hustling harder. It is about moving through your career with significantly less friction
Okay.
by replacing blonde effort with ruthless, strategic self-awareness.
It's the definition of working smarter by finally understanding what smarter actually means for your specific set of circumstances.
Which leads us to a final concept I want you, the listener, to carefully consider after we finish today. This raises an important question. If we finally accept the premise that life is fundamentally unfair, and that every single person is standing on a totally unique starting line with a completely different combination of weights and pulleys, does that realization actually grant us freedom?
Oh, I like that.
Think about the implications. What if your greatest unfair advantage moving forward is simply possessing the self-awareness to finally stop playing someone else's game and start designing your own?
That is precisely the kind of analytical shift we aim for on this show. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.